Hi, welcome back to the shed for episode 41 of GGBO 2023, and it finally feels like we're moving towards the finish line on this guitar. And in this episode we're going to tackle one of the last big jobs, and that's to get the frets sorted out. Okay, so we got the finish laid down onto this guitar last episode, and there's nothing I'd love to do more than to get some wet and dry out and start polishing this up, but it is still way too soft. It has only been on a few days and it really wouldn't take the polish that it could if we tried to do it now. So we need to think of something else to do. And one of the biggest jobs that remains is to get the frets sorted out. These have been pressed in, but I haven't done anything else to them. So we need to bevel the edges, level, crown, polish, and sort out the fret ends. So there's quite a lot of work to do there. So I best stop talking and crack on with it. And the first thing I'm going to do on this is just smooth off the fret ends and put a little bit of a bevel onto them. Now you might have remembered that this fretboard is actually bound with Wenge. So it doesn't look like it's bound, but it is. And that means that the fret tangs are kind of at least 1.5 millimeters away from the edge of the fretboard, both sides. So that means we never have to worry about kind of the tangs sprouting through, which makes our job a lot easier. But we still do have ever so tiny amount of fret protrusion past the edge of that fretboard. But it's quite easy to sort out, but I'm going to have to be a little bit careful because obviously we've got fresh lacquer on here. So the slightest touch would badly scratch it. So I'm just going to put a bit of masking tape over there. In fact, I'm going to put a couple of layers just to be on the safe side. I'm not pressing down particularly hard because I don't want this to stick to that soft lacquer either, because that could be just as disastrous. And what I'm going to do in the first instance is I've just got this fret dressing file. It's from Crimson, and it is actually quite a smooth cut file. So it's not that aggressive, and it's got quite substantial safe edges on both sides. So hopefully it won't do any damage. And I'm going to start off by just going down at quite a flat angle, just to take the ends of those frets level with the fretboard to start off with. And up here, they're not bad. But as we get down, they are quite proud. So just gently take those down. And you can hear when you get down level, because the tone changes, you lose that raspiness and it becomes a lot quieter, meaning you're hitting the wood, which isn't a problem. And with that established, I can now come back a bit more of an angle. And just bevel those back a bit. That looks good. It's still a little bit sharp, but not anywhere near as bad as it was. So gently peel that off. And we can address the other side. Now this side seems to be quite flat most of the way up. So most of the work on this is just going to be putting that bevel on. And that is that element done. It actually feels really nice. So with that done, the next job is to just make sure that this fretboard is as straight as it can be. And to do that, I've got my notched straight edge and I've got an 1/8 thou feeler gauge there. And what I'm looking for, I don't want to be able to get this under at any point. And there seems to be a little bit at either end. So I'm just going to have a quick tweak of the truss rod. And that seems to have it. So with that done, I'm now going to take a bit of time and mask up the entirety of the fretboard, just so we're not going to cause any damage when we start working on this. And we can get these leveled off. Now ordinarily I'd run 2 lengths of masking tape right the way down either side of the back of the neck. And that would help me get the masking tape off. But obviously this lacquer is very, very soft because it hasn't been on that long. So I don't want to do that on this occasion. I'll stick it down as firmly as I need to on the face of the fretboard, but try not to stick it down too firmly on the back of the neck. And I think I need a new scalpel blade. Okay, so with that all masked up, we can now move on to the next steps, which are to put some marker pen over all of these, just as a guide to what we're doing. We will then go at it with this leveling file to take the bulk of the waste off. Hopefully these have been pressed in so it won't be too much. And then I've got my leveling beam with 220 and 320 paper on, just to give it a final clean up pass. And then that should leave us relatively close to where we need to be in terms of the finish on these frets. I'll mask that off, missed that, naughty. So with that done, we can now start to just get some ink on those before we go at them with the file. Okay, so that's all of the frets kind of leveled off now, but as you can see, that's left them kind of flattened off quite a bit, some more than others. So what we need to do is to reinstate the crowns onto these, because we only want a very narrow point of contact through the center of the fret. And to do that, I always use a traditional 3-cornered triangular file that's got all of the points ground nice and smooth. So they're safe edges, so you're not going to damage the fretboard with that. And we just use that to kind of work the fret back from side to side until you've re-established that nice even crown. And to help that to happen, again, I'm just going to black these up with a bit of pen. And what we're aiming for is a nice thin line of black through the centre of the fret. And this is really quite a straightforward process. It's nothing overly complicated. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to come in from both sides, just follow the radius of the fretboard and slowly work that material back. Until we just have a very thin strip of pen running right the way through the centre of the fret. Now this file is relatively coarse, so we will need to kind of clean this fret up further, and we'll just use some fine wet and dry paper to do that. So I'm going to slowly start working my way up the fretboard. And hopefully before too much longer we'll get these massaged back into shape. Okay, so I'm nearly through with the crowning. I've got 4 left to do. These, kind of this end of the guitar, were quite hard because obviously there's not as much room because we've got the body in the way. So that's why I got those out of the way first. But these last 4 should be fairly straightforward. So we'll just carry on. Just get those finished off. And we can move on to the next bit, which is going to be sorting out the ends of the frets. And to tackle these fret ends, I'm just going to use this little fret end finishing file. These are very generic. I know StuMac do one. This is actually from Crimson. They are pretty much identical as far as I can see. Now there's 2 different sides to this, and they are configured slightly differently. So this side here is quite flat and it's got a sharp corner, whereas this side has got a rounded edge on it. And the difference is the sharp corner is to go right into this corner, right in the very junction of where the fret end meets the fretboard, because that is where the bulk of the rough feeling you will get from a fret end comes from. So that sharp corner is to get right in there and just remove any stray metal that's there. You can then turn it over and use the rounded side to just kind of round over the fret end. Some people just put a bit of a bevel on the fret end. I prefer something that's a bit more hemispherical. They just feel nicer to my finger. It's personal preference, nothing more. And it's just a matter of working your way up the fretboard and just removing any rough, sharp edges that aren't going to feel nice under your finger. Now I've done most of this side of the fretboard. We've just got a few more to do on those few frets that I've just crowned. And it needn't actually take a long time. You can usually do it with relatively few strokes of the file. So I'm just going to work my way through these and I'll get back to you when this stage is completed. Okay, so that's all the fret ends done. That is my least favourite part of this process. It doesn't take that long, but it's just a bit repetitive and becomes a little bit boring, but it needs doing because that is the feel of your guitar at the end of the day. If those fret ends are sharp, you'll know about it. It's just not at all pleasant. But with that done, we can kind of get on with finishing these frets off, and hopefully now it won't be too much longer. First thing I'm going to do is I've just got, this is a 400 grit pad, and I'm just going to very lightly just work up and down just to take out the rough file marks, and it doesn't take very long at all. And then we'll do the same thing with a bit of 800. It's 1000. And then a little bit of 1200. And that will give us a nice smooth top surface to the fret that won't have any kind of striations in, which will kind of cause noisy frets, and nobody really likes that. And then I'll just very gently give them a little bit of a rub. With the 1200, I'm kind of concentrating on the sides of the fret, but these are stainless steel frets, and you would rub for an awfully long time with 1200 paper before you made any kind of dimensional changes. So this is really just to kind of clean them up a bit, give them a bit of a polish. And then just smooth over those fret ends again. And technically, those are good to go, and that could quite easily be your finish. However, I like to take it one step further, and I buff them up with a Dremel and some polishing compound just to give it that final gleam and make them look super lovely. And all I use is, this is honing compound. It's the same stuff that I'd use on my strop when I'm sharpening chisels and plane blades, etc. And I just load a bit onto one of these cotton wheels on the Dremel. And I'll just use that to give it a quick polish up. Literally takes seconds. And hopefully you'll be able to see there. I've done the first two and they are very nice and shiny. So I'll just work my way down the board and get the rest of those done. And get the tape off, and we're pretty much finished. Okay, that's them all polished up. They're all looking very, very nice. Completely happy with those so far. So next up, we just need to get this masking tape off. Probably give the fretboard a bit of a clean up and an oil. And that'll be this part of the job done. Okay, and that's got its first coat of oil on now. It's gone in quite nicely, but it's going to need a few more, I think, just to kind of get the finish I want. It has darkened the wenge up a little bit, but from experience, the lighter figure in this wenge will become light again once the oil kind of soaks in and dries out just a little bit. So I'm not too worried about that, but it will need a little bit more oil. So I'm going to start putting a little bit more on and finish that off camera. Now it's been nearly a week now since the lacquer was put on, so it is hardening up a bit. It's nowhere near kind of full hardness, but we do want to get this one finished so we can move on to the next build. So the next major job will be to polish up the lacquer on the top of the body and the headstock, but that's going to be for next time. I'm going to leave this one here. So as always, until then, smash that like button if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.